All right. Hi, everyone, for joining. This is a very, very exciting session for us. Today, we have Gabrielle Leith. She's going to be talking about the Grapevine community, and this is part of our community tour series where we do deep dives into other communities and kind of touch upon their back ends. That doesn't sound right, but you know what I mean. And talking about some of the programs that they run. So Gabby, thank you so much for having us or being with us today. For those of you who don't know, Gabby is a community builder. She has over a decade of experience working in arts and culture and tech and media industries. She's currently the community manager at Grapevine, which is a community-led philanthropy. And before that, she also worked at Bramble, which is an immersive video conferencing platform. I think some of us already use it or are familiar with it working in the community space because they work for conferences and gatherings and various types of activations. Also, fun fact, her events have been featured in multiple publications, including the New York Times, which is a huge accomplishment. That's awesome. So please give a round of applause. Welcome to Gabby. And Gabby, I will give wow, I can't even think of the word, the virtual microphone over to you.
Amazing. I will take it. Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here and talk about the community we're building, and hopefully it's helpful to dig into some different areas, tech stacks, all that kind of stuff. So I have a little presentation that I'll kick things off with, and then we can kind of go from there. So I'm going to share my, oh, you know what? I cannot share my screen. It looks like I do not have sharing permissions. Maybe if you make me like a co-host or something.
Adolph, you know how to do that, right?
So I can only make Gabby a host. So I'm gonna do that.
Yeah, that'll be fine.
Amazing. Okay, that's great. Okay, perfect. All right, let me just make this a bit better. So Grapevine, we are the home for collaborative giving. I will get a little bit into that in a moment. So I just thought for today, I could talk a little bit about what a giving circle is, who we are as Grapevine, my role as a community manager there, take a little look at our tech stack. It's funny, when I was telling my boss, the founder, about this, she was like, oh, don't spend time on that. No one will care. And then I was like, I think that's probably the piece people might be most interested in. She was like, oh, okay. And then I'll talk a little bit about our different communities. So kind of how I think about breaking them up. So basically the people leading our giving circles and also our members donating to giving circles. So, all right. So I guess I'm just curious, for anyone here, has anyone heard of a giving circle before? Maybe just by like show of hands or in the chat. I'm always curious if people have heard about it. So I'm just going to go back. So giving circles are not new. We did not invent them. They have existed in many different forms and cultures throughout the beginning of time. But the giving circle model really became popular in the 80s by women in the United States. And the idea being that they decided, you know what, I don't have a lot of money, but I want to make an impact in my community. So by coming together as a collective, we can have more impact with our funds than if we're doing it one-off. That will be more sort of transactional. So basically, these giving circles have started to appear all over the world. Our product is just in the States right now, but essentially it's groups of people coming together to pool their funds and decide as a collective where they want to give those funds. So it's completely community-led at its core, and it's a really social, collective experience. And the research really shows there's lots of men within the movement, but it really is a women-led movement. The research shows that women like to give differently. They like to do it collectively. They actually give more. And they also like to give to more diverse organizations, more diverse causes, all that kind of stuff. So that's a little bit about the model itself. And then just some stats here. So to date, the movement has globally given almost $2 billion to nonprofits throughout the world. So it's kind of this movement that's in your backyard, but you might not know about. So this model, this collective model, really is changing the face of philanthropy and making everyone feel like a philanthropist. Not that it's this gated thing to only people of certain wealth. Often we get asked what the difference between crowdfunding and crowd granting is, which is how we look at the Giving Circle model. So I talked about this a little bit, but just to bring it out a bit more, community is at the core of this work, collective resources, collaboration, and continuation. So the idea that you're not just giving once, you're joining a collective of people who are contributing on a continual basis. And the model really is listening to the needs of your community. So we say in this movement, community knows what community needs. So that's a huge part of it. So this is just a quick sort of infographic on what that looks like. So start or join a Giving Circle, invite your friends, grow the group, and make an impact. So these are, I just thought we could just quickly show, so our community, because that's what we're here to talk about. These are just 2 examples of them coming together to decide where their funds will go. I think one of these groups is in Madison, and one of them is our San Diego group. So I'll just kind of quickly play one of these videos just so you can get a sense of things.
Living life in color. Everything around me looks so beautiful and sweet. Heavenly desire. Everything so bright, it's like a brand new movie scene. I'll be amazing. Colors, pictures, perfect.
So that's just an example of one of our groups. It's really simple. They've just got a table here at a patio. They've come together. Many of them have never met each other before to vote and decide where their pooled funds will go. Oops, sorry. I'll share this afterwards. So if you want to watch these videos, and again, you can do that. So as I said, Grapevine, we're actually the only platform that supports the infrastructure of Giving Circles. So in the past, Giving Circles were collecting checks from everyone. They didn't have a central way to communicate. So we came on board to centralize that. We're also have a nonprofit arm. So part of our work is not only supporting Giving Circles that already exist, but also launching Giving Circles. So we've launched about 300 now all over the United States, different location, cause areas, to introduce this model to more people and diversify sort of the cause areas represented and the donors as well. So to date, as I mentioned, we've moved over 21 million at this point since we started in March 2020. That's 2,200 nonprofits. We have over 50,000 members in our community, so we'll get a bit more into that. And also we have over 800 Giving Circles on the Grapevine platform. So me as the community manager, I work with our leaders running Giving Circles. So that's of that 50,000, that's about 3,200 people, working with them to organize events, training, resources, all that kind of stuff. A lot of our leaders are completely new to the model, so there's a lot of education that goes into that to help them feel confident in leading it. I also manage, we have a network of peer-led learning cohorts, so a place for our leaders to come together and to knowledge share, feel supported. And we'll look at one of those cohorts a little later on. And then part of my work is engaging that community of donating members. So that's kind of how I think about our community. We have our community of leaders who are also part of our community of donating members, but their needs and their interests are just a bit different. I do a lot of work with content creation, so blog writing, our monthly newsletters that goes out to both of our leaders and also our donating members. And then I do a lot of video editing and that kind of stuff. And then also working with the rest of our team. We're still a startup, we're still small. So everyone is super important on the team and has a big sort of part to play. And so I work a lot with our marketing, our growth marketing, on community-led growth, our product developments, and operational improvements. And then I also kind of goes back to what I mentioned that first point, but I manage a calendar of events for our Grapevine members and leaders. So I'm running a couple events a week, probably more than that actually. So just to dive in a little bit of what our current tech stack looks like. So it's a little unique because a lot of our work happens on the Grapevine platform, which basically you can think of it as these closed Facebook groups for all of our different giving circles. So a lot of the work happens there. And we also leverage for our events. LinkedIn has been a huge tool for how we have grown our community. It's a huge part of how our growth marketing invites people into the giving circle. So we post events on our LinkedIn. We're really active on our LinkedIn. We'll collect registrations that way. We also collect registrations through our different, there's a tool within all the giving circles to create events. So we do that as well. And then we also use Zoom to collect registrations as well. We use HubSpot, that's kind of our CRM right now. For analytics, we use a tool called Metabase. For our peer learning cohorts, we use Grapevine, and we'll look at one of those. For external comms with people, we'll use MailChimp. Customer.io is how we reach out to people who have joined a giving circle, and then also through our platform itself. Community resources right now, I use Notion, and we'll look at something I've built on Notion. Google Slides. I have a whole training modules for our leaders. That's all hosted on Google Slides. We use our CS team, our customer support team uses Help Scout to support our community questions. And then I also use Canva a lot when we're always giving our community ideas for things to post. So I'll create a lot of templates in Canva for that. And then internal comms, we use Slack, Notion, and Asana. So one of the biggest challenges I definitely find is we don't have a community specific CRM. We're hosted in a lot of different places. That's also just a symptom of a community hire was not in any of the beginning people, sort of some of the originals. So I sort of inherited a lot of these pieces, and yeah, just kind of always trying to figure out how I might improve all of this. This is just, I'll include this in the sort of the follow-up, but this is an example of a piece of content I created around leaders are super critical, especially for those groups that we launched to help kind of kick them off and get things going. So I did a bit of a campaign around recruiting leaders for our giving circle. So this is a video around that. Oh, you know what? I'm going to not play it because it's like a minute. And then I'll get into now looking a bit more at our sort of different communities. Oops. Okay, here we go. So as I mentioned, I kind of think of it as two different sects that I'm looking at. So basically our leader community and then our donating members. So to look at first our leader community, these are the main ways we engage people. So our peer learning cohorts, we have about 4 of those right now. We run workshops for our community of leaders to help them feel supported. And a lot of those are regular events, but also a big part of what I do is looking at our learning cohorts, questions that are coming up or topics. I will program stuff based on that as well. So recently people have wanted to be better at facilitating their events. So we're doing an event around that, getting sponsorship for their giving circles. So we partnered with someone to do that. I also host weekly office hours. So this is a chance for leaders. I literally just sit there on Zoom and take questions as they come in. And then resources. So we have different training modules and a resource library as well. So I think it actually might be useful if I pull up an example. Can everyone see this learning cohort, or is it still? Okay, perfect. So this is an example of one of our learning cohorts. This is the Grapevine platform. So it's kind of being MacGyvered for this learning cohort because it's not actually the setup for it. And it works well in some ways because our community is hosted, their giving circles on the platform. And now if they join one of our peer learning cohorts, it shows up in their dashboard, but it's not built for community specifically. So there's also some challenges there. But something recently that our tech team just built is I'm now able to mention people in posts that I'm doing, whereas before, if someone would comment something or make a post, I couldn't actually loop in a community member to be like, hey, check this out. Do you have certain feedback? Which is such a critical thing. I'm sure people on this call know that. So that was definitely a hindrance for a while, but I sort of weighed the options and decided to go with this. But who knows if I'll move our community cohort somewhere else at some point, but you can get a sense just in here. So you can see I've set some sort of like ground rules for the community, how they can engage and not engage, or suggestions for how to engage, and then upcoming events. So these are all of our events for community members. They can RSVP here. They all appear on the right-hand side. You can also get a sense of all the different community members here. And if you click on someone, you'll be linked to their profile. So their LinkedIn, their interest areas, the giving circle they're a part of, people they've connected with, any certificates they've gotten through us. So that's how that works as well. And then on the homepage, I've sort of pinned a post. It's kind of old now, it's from October, but letting people know about our office hours, our leader resources, all that kind of stuff. So people have engaged on that post. And then these are events coming up, but in our office hours, but people also just do posts this way. And then people comment there as well. So people ask questions. So you can see a recent post here by chance is our list of all the Instagram handles for other giving circles. I would love an opportunity to follow along. So those are kind of the types of questions that we get in our peer leading cohort, and people have jumped in here. I will try and respond as well always. Yeah, so you can see this is me as well. So that's a little bit about how our cohorts look. I need to call something out now. I can't remember, but on the sort of resource piece, two really important things for our leaders are, so we run these weekly office hours, but here, this is, everyone can see this Grapevine leader resources, right? So this is really when a new leader is onboarded, this is the resource that they get sent. And there's a lot of information. I've tried to break it up into these modules. Some people love that. Some people find it super overwhelming. So, but this is sort of a really key piece of information for our leaders. And then this is also here, our calendar of events. So you can see here, this is what I host in Notion. I've split it up as support events and learning events. So these are all the different sort of events coming up for our community. And I try and give a little explanation of what they all are. So we've got, for example, the art of facilitation, hard conversations, and fostering engagement. There's with giving circles where you're bringing people together. There can be hard conversations you have to have around the causes you want to support and how you're going to come to a consensus. So that's a really critical event we organize. So to kind of hop back here into the presentation, these are sort of, for our leader community, these are the main sort of pieces that we do to support. So this is our donating member community. So this is a little bit different because these are people who are donating to a giving circle and participating, but they might not want to be as involved as our leaders, but we still want to engage them and connect them with other members. So this is sort of how we do that. So we host monthly member mixers. So this is an hour where we bring members from all over the United States together to meet other members and talk about their giving circles. We do breakout rooms. These are super well attended. We usually get at least 100 people on them. They're a lot of fun. And there's something we've decided to do monthly. Our speaker series. So we try and do these monthly. We bring in sort of important people within the movement to talk about. We just did one last month about the future of giving circles with someone named Holly Lee, who is a sort of an original leader in this movement. And then we have one coming up next month around how teams and ERGs can leverage giving circles as a tool to create purpose and engagement within their work. So I'm excited for that, and please check that out for anyone who's interested. We also, our founder hosts weekly office hours twice a week, and I help run those. She brings people together to answer questions. And then something we've just launched is our Growth Council. So this is members who work in the marketing space in some way to help us grow the collective giving movement. So we've just launched that. So we have a Slack channel for those people, and also we host monthly sessions, brainstorming sessions. So this is just, this is our community. That Zoom is one of our monthly mixers. These are just great examples of some of our groups who are self-organizing to come together. Some of our groups will create things like our Birmingham Women for Good group, Social Squad. They've come together to do that. You can see in the left-hand corner, them giving away a check to a nonprofit. And this is sort of how the community operates. So that kind of ends the presentation piece of it. So I don't know if anyone has any questions. I'm curious, any feedback also on how to make running community easier. But that's kind of what I've got.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing, Gabby. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in chat. Otherwise, in the meantime, I also had a couple questions just out of curiosity, and this doesn't really have to do with like the community tour, but you mentioned at the very beginning that like women and men tend to give in different ways. I'm just curious in terms of how, like, what are patterns of how men generally give or involve themselves philanthropically?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I'm actually going to pull up a really useful infographic. So something that we're working on right now is the last research done on giving circles was from 2017. So we're working with we have a close nonprofit partner called Philanthropy Together, who their whole purpose is sort of working on spreading awareness around giving circles. So we're doing some updated research, but this thing always takes, I don't know why this infographic is like notoriously slow for loading. So let me just pull it up quickly. But I always bring this up in meetings and then it's like, I just have to watch this load. But I don't know why it like really takes its time. Okay, so this is just, this is from 2016. So it's a little bit outdated now, but since 2007 to 2016, it tripled this movement. So that is going to look a lot different now. 80% of giving circles make grants to local geographic areas. 60% are identity-based groups, so are formed around religion, gender, race, age, cause areas. And as you can see here, women make up the majority of members. So in 2016, that was 70%. Many networks have now sort of emerged in giving circles, but that's a really interesting stat. This majority of giving circles being made up of women. And I'm curious to see what the updated research we're doing will show. But yeah, as I said, it really is interesting, the research around this, because it really shows that women like to give collectively and men don't like to give as collectively. And there are men within the movement that's, that exists, but it really has its roots in being a community women-led model. So a lot of our groups, our demographics represent that, but it's something that we're seeing increasingly change. We have a network on Grapevine called Guys Who Give, and it's men who come together to collectively give. There are also, there's a big giving circle network called 100 Women Who Care. They're all over the world. The idea being to get 100 women in your group giving $100 quarterly, so that each quarter you're giving away a $10,000 grant. And there are teen groups. There's 100 people who care teen groups. There are men groups. So it certainly exists, but the roots certainly are a very women-led movement, which is interesting. So it's changing, but yeah. And as I said, the research really shows that women like to give to more diverse causes, to more different, more diverse in terms of nonprofits, and they also like to give more generally.
That's very interesting. Okay, now community related. It was interesting because at the very beginning, it definitely sounded like community was one of the first priorities of, establishing, the company, and, you're still a startup. And so I was like, oh, it's so cool. I love it when startups work on prioritizing a community role. And then later on, you mentioned that it was actually not one of the first priorities, and that you had to adopt a lot of the the processes and the programs already. So I'm kind of curious, and you're doing so much, so I'm kind of curious to hear, what was the pivoting moment for the company to decide that they needed someone dedicated to community? And then also, with all of the different programs and things that you're running, what kind of support from, I'm assuming you're a team of one, aside from maybe your manager,
Yeah.
but how does how do stakeholders and other people within the company help support the community function? It sounds like you have amazing support from your founder, but what other stakeholders are really good community proponents?
Yeah. So yeah, it's interesting. So our company, the whole growth strategy is community led. It's very much the core of the work. They very much view community as the key facet, which is really different than my company before, where it was a very opposite situation, where I was they were yeah, community, you can engage people that way, but they didn't see it as a growth thing in the same way. And also I was I was always pitching community and doing sort of a road show about it. Whereas now it's kind of the complete opposite, where I guess it's a good problem to have, but so much is on the work I'm doing for the sort of sustainability of the company. So before I came on, there was a director of community and content, and she was actually leaving. So I was replacing her, but they hired for a community manager. But kind of once I got a better sense of the work she was doing, it wasn't community. It was really just the beginning blocks of growing the users. So it was a lot of running demos about how the product worked, and reaching out to these giving circles that existed to get them on board, and really sort of figuring out the customer support piece of it. So it was those really early stages, but she wasn't dedicated. She was just doing so much in terms of just growing who I now work with. That was 50,000 people, but it was kind of much more from this growth lens and sort of user lens, opposed to, okay, now what's our strategy for the community itself? So when I came on board, a big piece of that work, I kind of am not as involved in the CS management of the CS team, which is a lot of what she was doing. And I'm really just focused on the strategy itself. And getting our community initiatives up and running. None of those things really existed at when she had left. So it was really kind of like, okay, we have 50,000 people. What are we going to do now? So in one way, our company is fully community led and focused on that, but there wasn't really someone building out the processes and the tools around that. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that does make sense. Very interesting. And then, so you mentioned that you have your own, well, maybe not your own, but like a developer that's working on the Grapevine platform, and I guess like helping you support additional features or functionalities that like community members are asking for. Do they also help you with things like integrations or automations or kind of like the operational side of the house?
Yeah, so our team, I really work closely with our growth marketing, the founder, and our CTO. And then our CTO has, I think, 3 or 4 engineers. And then we have a CS team of about 4 people on that side. And then we also have a team that helps with like data stuff in general. But that's sort of what our current organization looks like. So I will work really closely with our CTO on that stuff. So he is really open to how we can improve things. He just sort of was like, got everything in place and started the integrations, but I will kind of work with him on I mean, one thing we wanted to do, for example, was connect our community with coffee chats, one-on-one coffee chats. That felt like something really important. So I was looking at different tools like Orbit with 2 eyes, Meetsy, all these different things. And then he was like, we were kind of looking at it, and then he was like, you know what, I'm just going to, like, it didn't quite do what we wanted it to do. So he was like really open to us integrating that. But in the end, he was like, we're just going to build this feature. So we actually built that. So there's a lot of communication there between how we can either integrate and leverage products, or sometimes it'll come down to like, we're actually going to have the team build it. So one thing right now, we're trying to figure out how to do leaderboards. And he is like, I don't want to build that. So I'm trying to figure out how to incorporate a leaderboard in. But if anyone has any suggestions, because so many of the ones I found are connected to like Circle or something that's a bigger,
like an insighted platform.
Exactly. Nothing that sort of stands alone. So yeah. And then so much feedback we get from our community. I have a process where I'll share insights, and he'll prioritize ones based on if it's a big need for the community or if it's more niche. So that's really, and he'll also attend about once a month the office hours I run for our leaders. He'll sit in on those, and he'll present upcoming designs. He'll get feedback from our community, and he'll also just sit in so that he can learn what people are asking. He's really involved. He actually will have meetings with community members to learn about stuff. So he's really understands the value of leveraging that. And it's great that he'll make time for those things, because I think sometimes CTOs can be like, oh, just pass along information. But he's like, oh, this is so valuable whenever I sit there. So he's great.
I love that. It sounds like a very involved CTO who not only understands community, but wants to help support, their asks and how to best support them in, whatever they're working on or trying to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and even just to spend the time in office hours, like that's really valuable time. Very cool.
Yeah, and it's great for our community too, because then they see these. So he's like kind of redesigning their pages, and they get to see it early on, and they're like, they feel excited about it. They're like, oh, we're some of the first people to see this, and they give suggestions that really get listened to. So it works both ways.
Very cool. Now, in terms of kind of like community member enablement, it sounds like when does someone join the community? And what is their onboarding experience like? Are they looking to get involved in a giving circle or launch one or donate or what have you? And then they, stumble across Grapevine and then they can just join? Or, is there an onboarding process for new people? And then community is part of that kind of like onboarding and enablement? Like, how does that kind of work?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So there's kind of 3 different onboarding flows they might get put into. And one thing I'll say is that a piece of feedback we get so often is people are like, you're emailing us too much. People get too much from us. And I'm actually in the middle of trying to do an audit of all of our communication, because it's a lot that people get. And depending on the route they come in, they might be put in 2 flows. So the first one is people who just want to start a giving circle on their own, or transition their giving circle onto the platform. So they basically create a group. And then if they do that, they get put into our sort of welcome flow, which will give them resources, invite them to office hours, check in on how they're feeling, all that kind of stuff. So those are kind of, we think of those as our community-led giving circles. Then if someone joins from outreach we would have done into a group we took the initiation to create, they join the group, they get put into a different flow because it's slightly different. They're not starting a group, they're joining one that already exists, and they likely know very little about a giving circle at that point. So they'll be put into a different flow that's more education based and trying to convert them to be a donating member. So then those are sort of the 2 flows, but if they become a leader, they're put into an additional flow, which is sort of training them. I should say, sorry, for the groups we initiate, they'll get put into a leader onboarding flow as well. So connecting them with the other leaders, all those workshops I showed you. So those are sort of the different places they get put. And then they also get put into one of those peer learning cohorts. So they're also getting email notifications if they haven't turned them off every time someone posts or every day. Like, so there is definitely an issue with inundating people with communication, I would say. But those are sort of the 3 paths. And if they are just invited into a group, that's through our HubSpot flow. We think of those as people who haven't converted yet to being a donating member or a leader of a group yet. Once they have, they're in our customer IO flow. So the distinction is something I inherited, and I'm not sure if it makes the most sense, but sometimes those things just feel so overwhelming to change. So right now, that's kind of how it is. Those are our 2 systems managing those 2 different people.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Sounds like maybe like a subscription center or like subscription preferences is something on your roadmap for the near future.
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah. Because if they unsubscribe from one thing, they might still be on another thing. So we need to also educate people on how to control their settings a bit, but that should definitely be something.
Very cool. Venia, I know you're not shy. Do you want to come off mute and ask your question around data and the data team?
Sure. I primarily asked this question because I've kind of been on a little bit of a tirade / I genuinely care about this a lot. One of the big issues that I have found, and it's kind of coming from the fact that community operations and also data are going through this issue where we're tired of departments being siloed and the community manager having to jump from department to department, right? So in order to solve that problem, there's been this notion of data and analytics and also community operations becoming super departments where representatives of each department are responsible for their metrics. The big problem with that is that it's highly, what is the word? It's the opposite of practical. It's idealistic. There we go. So I am wondering, in your organization, how do you handle that? What is the setup that your data team has, not just with community, but other departments in the company? How do you realistically develop that in Grapevine?
Oh, that's such a good question.
Interesting.
Also, and yeah, I watched a talk you did recently on YouTube. It was so good. I don't know what it was part of. I'm trying to remember, but it was like really, really great. Okay, let me pull up. I feel like it's okay if I show this, but it might be interesting for you to see actually how it kind of looks. Sorry, let's go let me query here. Okay, so I basically have a community. This is one of the hardest parts, but like, this is basically, so we use, are you familiar? Do you know Metabase at all as like a tool? Okay, so this is basically our CTO has set it up for us, and it's taking all the data from like HubSpot, Customer IO, that kind of stuff. And then this is where all our reports go, so we can design different reports. This is a community dashboard they created for me, so I can see different things happening in the community. So for example, all the upcoming events that people have created within their giving circles. I can see here, like, basically the groups we started, we call those our leader list groups because they're ones we initiated and are finding leaders for. So you can see here, people who have joined the group and are donating, this is how we track them. And then if you click in, you can actually see the giving circles and the people they're contributed to. And then we have things like churn. This is where that pulls. So this is, we can see like here, people commenting in groups, why there's, if they did a post on why they joined, churn, all that kind of stuff. We can also see down here. Yeah, so this is the kind of thing. And then we have different, our marketing team, for example, we have like a growth dashboard. And then if people are asking for different reports, our CTO will kind of, he's in charge of sort of making a report for us, and that we pin to our sort of dashboard. So I guess to answer your question, we all have access to that, and we kind of look at it together in meetings. But it's a lot, and the data is messy sometimes, in the sense that like it'll look like we've had a bunch of churns one week, but it's just payment, like credit cards that have failed. So they're kind of, it's not always representing correctly the churn. So it's sort of like a work in progress, but that's how we communicate. And we have a Friday experiment. We call it our experiment meeting, but it's basically where we look through that data together. And that's also where it will come up like, oh, Errol, the name of our CTO, would be great if you built a report for this because we'd like to know this, or that kind of thing. But that's kind of the way we decided to organize it, so we could not feel as siloed when we're looking at data. But there's always a question of like, does this report it? Like, does this exist? Like, it feels like Errol's the only one who knows all the reports that exist. So there's not really within Metabase, it's a bit of a sea of information to sift through. I'm curious if that's like for your community, is that how is that kind of how you think about, or you look at data? I'm so like with my old work at Bramble, we use Circle. And so I actually looked at stuff a lot more through Circle and through HubSpot. We also used HubSpot, but it was really disconnected. So this actually feels a bit more unified to me. But it's also, it's also like complicated.
Yeah. So Chris Mercer is one of the leaders for measurementmarketing.io, and he's one of the people that I look to when it comes to measurement in general. But there's also a difference between measuring a marketing funnel, which has already been implemented for up to a decade, and retarget marketing kind of like really went for it. But for me, at least, one of the things that I find needs to happen is measurement needs to stop being a project where you build a dashboard and you build a report for individual concepts in individual departments. So I've been trying to move people away from this concept of building a report for one single aspect of their job, because I don't really think that that's super useful. And the majority of the reason is because content is king, but context is queen. And when you have an entire organization going into a single department, they pull up those dashboards and they're like, I don't know what I'm looking like. The reports make sense, but I have no benchmarks because the department's report is entirely based on the department's ROI factor or value or something super specific. And I feel like it's the context that is being missed across the organization, which is causing a lot of confusion interdepartmentally. Sales is going, hey, the leads aren't good quality enough. And marketing is going, well, you're not closing on the leads. Like, maybe change the sales process. And then you look at the community manager who's like, hey, there's this disconnect and it's causing problems with our community and we're getting ridiculous amounts of support tickets for it. So for me, I'm trying to, and I feel like Mercer is doing the same thing where he's like, measurement needs to be a department, not a project. And whenever you're building an actual dashboard, it needs to work like the dashboard on your car. How fast are we going? Speed up or slow down? How much fuel do we have? Do we need to pull over to the side of the road? And then reports are meant to be like, okay, we pulled over. What happened? Let's check the oil and now check the like next important things in the engine. I'll stop talking, but yeah.
I have a couple of thoughts, if that's okay, just to step in from an operational standpoint. Is what's worked historically with teams that I've worked on is during the like annual KPI or OKR setting process, each team lead across the company comes together, and as we all know, community is super cross-functional. We make sure that community has tied goals and vice versa. Every team has tied goals based off of community initiatives. And of course it's different, like support, like case deflection versus like, onboarding and enablement and what have you. So we make sure that every team has some sort of community related KPI related to their team and their goals. That way there's a common goal that we're aiming for. And as we're building reports and dashboards, every team has those shared goals in their dashboard, which then we meet on regularly. That way we can make sure that like both teams are, working together, whether it's the support team is pointing people to the community or the community is, adding new articles to help with that case deflection. And then we kind of make sure that all the different teams are aligned. Then it actually adds a lot of like different cross functionality where those silos are broken down to a certain extent. And then I think one additional thing is understanding and building your reports thoughtfully such that you have the intent. So you hit the nail on the head with like the car and the dashboard and everything like that. But even taking it one step further, looking at the, I don't know, the report on the car, like how some cars you can do a little thing and it'll do a signal to tell you what's wrong. I think that's the insight part that's missing. Is like, okay, so you have all these numbers in front of you. What does that mean? What do you do? Like, what are the actions that you should take based off of that? And then also what are like potential risk areas or red flags that are trending from the data that then you and, your appropriate stakeholders can work on resolving or preventing or leaning into more later on. And that's a very, very long process. And it kind of needs to be a top-down approach because if you're working from bottoms up, it's really hard to get some of that stakeholder buy-in and get them involved within, sharing those aligned goals. So having kind of like that support from leadership allows you to create those shared goals across the company and making sure that the teams are talking to each other and you're not, creating marketing siloed from support, siloed from CS. And then community has to like jump in and be like, no, we should be in here. We should be in here. But if you start it from the get-go, it really helps kind of make the process easier later on.
Yeah, that's such a good point about the insights. That's one of the pieces with all my community work, I feel like is the hardest part is it's like you're looking at this information, but the insights on what it's telling you is not as easy to extract. And like, sometimes it's like, I'll look at a spreadsheet of churns and it's hard to extrapolate from that, beyond, okay, there's a lot of churn in this one group, I could go into that group and look at every post, try and figure that out, but it's hard to make sense of the data. And I feel like with the startup especially, we're moving quickly, we're experimenting all the time with different things. We'll run an experiment, and then the metrics, just to kind of evaluate how successful it was, it feels hard to figure out. I feel like we can do a better job at, okay, we know the experiment we want to run. For example, for our top people who were referring members, we created this community builder certificate for them and sent them an email to share it out on LinkedIn. And it was like, okay, this is great, but now what do we do with this, the insights around this of how many people shared it out? And anyway, yeah, totally.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, we are actually over time because we were supposed to end at 45, but this conversation was very, very interesting to me, so I wanted to keep it going. If there are any follow-up questions, Gabby, how can people reach you? Oh, you're on mute. You're still on mute. Can you hear me, Gabby?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm on LinkedIn, so that's a great way to get in touch with me. And I see the comment about the leaderboard, so I'm gonna think about that. Yeah, I've been trying to figure out. I saw someone posted recently about pinning stuff, pin boards versus leaderboards, and I was like, that's interesting. Just, yeah, what kind of vibe you want to have with this? So anyway, but yeah, I'd love to connect at any point if anyone's would like to talk further.
Awesome. Alrighty. Well, thank you for coming, Venia, and thanks for coming, Martha and Roman and Adelka. And thank you, Gabby, so much. That was a very, like, you've got my wheels turning. So I appreciate, to continue that car analogy, the wheels are turning. I appreciate you coming and sharing that with us. And the recording will be up shortly. So thanks so much. And I hope everyone has a great rest of their day.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. Thanks.